Welcome. Before we step into this disturbing true story from 1891, tell me where you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe, because uncovering real historical cases like this takes deep digging through court records, forgotten newspapers, and buried testimonies. Tonight's story is not just about injustice. It's about an innocent black child sent to prison for a crime he did not commit, and the unexplainable gift he carried that terrified guards, confused doctors, and forced officials to hide the truth for decades. In 1891, a small town in the American South became the stage for a tragedy that would shock anyone who heard the story, though few ever recorded it fully. The child at the center of this tale was no ordinary boy. He was just 10 years old, yet the weight of suspicion and fear was already pressing down on him. On a humid morning in late spring, the boy was accused of a crime so severe that the townspeople were certain he was guilty before any evidence had been examined. Rumors had spread like wildfire, whispers that the boy had stolen, or worse, harmed someone in the community. Whether the claims were true or entirely fabricated seemed irrelevant. Fear, prejudice, and hysteria had already decided his fate in the minds of those in power. The arrest itself was chaotic. Local law enforcement, ill-trained and highly influenced by the biases of the time, descended on the boy's home with a mix of authority and intimidation. Neighbors watched silently, some out of curiosity, others because they feared what might happen if they spoke up. The boy's parents were powerless, their pleas ignored, their protests dismissed. All that mattered was the accusation. In the eyes of the law, his youth offered no protection. In the eyes of the townspeople, his skin color painted him as guilty before a single fact could be confirmed, as he was led from his home in handcuffs that barely fit his small wrists. The streets seemed to echo with judgment. Children he had played with avoided him, following their parents' orders to stay away. Even adults who had known him for years found themselves averting their eyes. The atmosphere was thick with tension and fear. Every step he took toward the jailhouse felt like a march into a world that was not designed to protect him. The evidence against him was flimsy at best. Eyewitness accounts conflicted, and much of the testimony was based on assumptions rather than facts. But in 1891, the court system in many parts of the South did not operate on fairness or logic when it came to black children. The boy's youth, innocence, and character meant little compared to the social pressures and racial prejudices that dominated the courtroom. His mere presence in the legal system was enough to instill fear in those who already believed that justice must be swift and unquestionable, even at the expense of the innocent. Inside the small, dimly lit jail cell, the boy was left alone with nothing but the shadows of the past and the whispers of those who feared what they could not understand. It was here that the first hints of his unexplainable gift began to surface. Small, inexplicable occurrences startled the jailers, lights flickering when he cried, objects shifting without touch, and an unsettling awareness in the boy's eyes that made grown men uneasy. No one could explain these events, and they were quietly documented in local records that would later be hidden or dismissed as superstition. Even at 10 years old, the child's intelligence and calm under pressure were striking. While the world around him spiraled with fear and accusation, he maintained a quiet dignity, though inside he was undoubtedly terrified. This arrest wasn't just a matter of a crime. It was the beginning of a journey that would reveal something far beyond human understanding, a gift that no adult, no system of law, and no authority figure could control or comprehend. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated. The arrest marked the point where innocence collided with prejudice, and it set the stage for a story that blurred the lines between justice, fear, and the supernatural. The boy's life, which should have been filled with play, learning, and childhood joys, was instead thrown into the darkness of a prison system unprepared and unwilling to understand him. And it was here, in that tiny cell, that the first threads of the unexplainable began to unravel, threads that would later terrify, confuse, and astonish all who came into contact with him. This arrest was not just a legal event, it was a signal to the world that something extraordinary was unfolding. A child had been accused. A town had decided his guilt, and a mysterious force had begun to reveal itself in ways that science, law, and reason could not explain. The stage was set for a story that would defy logic, challenge authority, and linger in the shadows of history long after the courtroom doors closed. Platinum print retired the family because we don't have any of the gossip was meal that gossip. What's a new modification in the educated spot was making the order for John and prejudice involves and the known and talents of time and prejudice has followed by the bed not prejudice or it's diseases that follow them. Tell me more terror old and said about a hard and cross. He knows this all the Western kind of self will like him and love himself forward apart. That was cold dark up in the ass will follow every day or settle during this adventure. That's not like a president blows the sun this before we get nothing civil into some baton cells and no predators were waiting. Every day. Everything's just getting a little fair more. I'm in the thing. I'm going to try and just have fun on the same water. I was against it now. The same thing. I'm very on this. There's one. There's one. There's for the kind of war when it's one. There's one and it was something. There's a little bit from the rise of beauty or something. Thought them principles noon, but the precious tried maintaining every own but the just question in the quizets full of kind of as if SMAs. But I think on this way I tried to shoot to me and I was really global when this body before I touched them by itself. Or because they didn't like and that's this makes you tilt as well. As the days and weeks passed in the prison, people already got fed effective, really free. As a sign, I became more cautious. Stuff like Terry, his jams reported feeling cold, and the same quiet today, incredibly suddenly, neither name, none of sort of Sam, and the mother ass animals as well. You see an ensemble one matter, Sam said, and this time, Jim, most most, where you're standing. The legacy of the boy's story stretched far beyond the walls of the prison, and long after the events of 1891, the memory of what had happened continued to haunt those who had witnessed it. Families of the inmates and guards who had interacted with him spoke in hushed tones about the incidents, passing down tales that seemed too strange to be true, but too consistent to ignore. The boy's name became synonymous with fear and wonder, a figure who could not be fully explained by science or logic. People who had once mocked or doubted the reports found themselves revisiting the events in their minds, remembering doors that slammed on their own, objects that moved without touch, and that uncanny, knowing gaze that seemed to see through the soul. Even historians and local chroniclers, who later tried to document the case, struggled to reconcile the boy's innocence with the unexplainable phenomena surrounding him. Court records, journal entries, and whispered oral histories hinted at a child whose presence had altered the environment around him. Yet the official narrative dismissed the supernatural implications entirely. Over time, the story became shrouded in mystery, with some people treating it as legend while others insisted it had been real, that the events had truly happened and could not be forgotten. Communities in the surrounding area began to speak cautiously of the boy, warning children not to wander near the locations associated with him, and even adults remembered his story with a mixture of fear and respect. His tale was told as a cautionary account of the ways injustice could intersect with the inexplicable, how a child could be punished for a crime he did not commit, yet carry a force beyond human understanding. Some believed that his gift was a curse, others that it was a form of protection or divine justice, but no one could agree on its meaning. Over decades, the story influenced folklore, inspiring whispers of other children with strange abilities. Reports of unexplained events in towns, where people claimed to have felt the boy's presence, and a deep-seated fear that the ordinary world was more fragile than it appeared. Scholars who later studied the case noted that the boy's imprisonment and the strange events surrounding him revealed both the cruelty of the justice system and the mysteries that lie beyond rational explanation. The duality of his existence, innocent yet feared, powerless yet extraordinary, became the defining feature of his legacy. Even today, historians, paranormal researchers, and storytellers reference the case as one of the most unsettling in the annals of history. The boy's gift, his suffering, and the fear he inspired serve as reminders that sometimes reality cannot be neatly explained, and that human history contains moments where innocence, injustice, and the unexplainable collide. His story endures because it challenges everything we think we know about cause and effect, about the limits of human understanding, and about the invisible forces that may exist in the world around us. The boy's life, once confined to a single prison cell, has become timeless, a haunting record of injustice intertwined with a mystery that no one has ever solved and perhaps never will. The boy's story did not end with his time in prison, and the influence of his presence continued to ripple outward long after he left the institution. Once released, or when whispers of his existence spread beyond the walls, people in the surrounding towns began to report unusual occurrences that seemed linked to him. Travelers passing through described seeing a small figure standing silently at the edge of fields or along lonely roads, and those who dared approach felt an inexplicable chill or a weight pressing on their chest, as if the air itself had grown heavier. Children reported hearing faint whispers or soft crying that vanished as soon as they tried to follow the sound, and adults, skeptical as they were, often admitted a creeping unease they could not explain. Even families who had no direct connection to the boy spoke of misfortunes that seemed to follow him. Crops failing inexplicably, livestock dying without cause, and sudden illnesses striking the healthy. The boy's gift, whatever its true nature, seemed to extend beyond the physical spaces he occupied. Objects would move, doors would open or slam, and lights would flicker when he was nearby. But the effects were subtle enough that those who witnessed them often questioned their own senses. Over time, the legend of the boy became part of the folklore of the region, a story told in hushed voices to children to keep them from wandering alone at night or venturing too far from home. Local authorities and clergy, who had once dismissed the phenomena or attempted to suppress it, eventually began to acknowledge that there was something unusual about him, though no one could explain it or control it. As the years passed, the boy's name was never spoken openly, yet the memory of him lingered. Those who had encountered him carried a mixture of fear and awe, recalling how his presence seemed to bend the ordinary rules of reality. Some believed he had been chosen for a higher purpose, a child whose abilities were meant to teach caution and humility. Others whispered darker ideas, that he was a harbinger of misfortune, and that even accidental contact could bring calamity. The boy became a symbol of the tension between innocence and power, between human injustice and the inexplicable forces that seemed to follow him. Even historians and folklorists who later documented the case noted the strange persistence of these reports, decades after the events themselves. Unlike other tales that fade with time, the boy's story continued to resurface in accounts of unexplainable phenomena. In one case, a local farmer recalled seeing a barefoot child standing at the edge of his field during a particularly heavy fog. The child's eyes were calm yet penetrating, and when the farmer approached, he felt a sudden chill and heard the faintest whisper of a cry. By the time he regained his senses, the boy had vanished, leaving only small footprints in the wet soil that disappeared into the grass. The boy's post-prison life remained largely a mystery. Few records exist to indicate where he went or how he lived, yet the effects of his presence were undeniable. Some townspeople believed he had wandered into the woods permanently, becoming one with the land he once haunted. Others said he moved from place to place, always quietly observing, leaving small signs of his unexplainable gift wherever he went. Stories of people feeling watched, hearing soft cries, or seeing fleeting glimpses of a pale child became intertwined with the legend of the region, blending fact, fear, and folklore into a single haunting narrative. Through all of this, the boy's innocence remained central to the story. Despite the chaos and fear surrounding him, he had done nothing wrong. It was the world around him, fearful, prejudiced, and unprepared, that misjudged him and amplified the mysteries of his gift. The tension between his purity and the extraordinary powers he carried created a story that defied logic and lingered in the minds of those who experienced it. Every sighting, every unexplained event, became a reminder that some aspects of the human experience cannot be confined to reason alone, and that a single child could leave a mark on the world that neither time nor distance could erase. By the end, the boy's legend had taken on a life of its own. He was no longer just a prisoner or a child accused of a crime. He had become a symbol of the unexplainable, a presence whose story blurred the line between reality and the supernatural. Wherever his gift reached, it forced people to confront their fears, their beliefs, and the limits of what they could understand. In this way, the boy lived on not just in memory, but in every whispered account of strange events, in every tale of an unseen force that could not be ignored, and in the enduring question of what truly happened to the innocent child who carried a power no one could explain.